Hi everyone, in this video we're learning about the distance and midpoint formula, and those formulas are printed on the front of your foldable. They're both kind of similar to slope, or at least this one's kind of similar to the slope, and sort of like the Pythagorean theorem. It all kind of relates together. Midpoint formula, this is kind of familiar too, because when we were finding things that were exactly in the middle, we add them together and divide by 2. Now we're just going to do that for our x and our y coordinates. So your foldable is printed upside down on the inside, so just be aware that that's just how it is. It's not my fault, so don't blame me. Okay, so let's talk about distance formula first. So the distance formula tells us if we're given 2 points on a coordinate grid, how far apart those 2 points are. So now obviously if our points are vertical or horizontal, we can just count the distance between them. But when they're on the slanted, you can't just count. Great. So remember how I said it relates to the Pythagorean theorem? That's because you could draw a right circle and then you do a squared b squared equals c squared. So that's where it comes from. And if you like doing it that way better, you really could if you had a graph. Just graph the 2 points and make a right triangle out of it and use a squared b squared, and then you would be finding c squared. Okay, but we're going to use the formula since that's what this lesson's all about. Okay, so remember when you're given an ordered pair, you got x and then y. So since we have 2 ordered pairs, we'll call this one 1 and then the second one 2. So we'll plug in our x's and subtract. Plug in our y's, subtract, we square them, and then add them together. So the distance is going to equal the difference of the x's. So we got 2 and -3. So 2 minus -3 squared plus y2 minus y1, 3 minus 1 squared. So using order of operations, we do parentheses first. So 2 minus -3 is 5. 3 minus 1 is 2. If we square things, we get the square root of 25 plus 4, which means that our distance between those 2 points is the square root of 29. You know me and square roots. I like to leave it like that, but let's just see what our decimal would be. So that'd be approximately 5.39. For this, we're just going to leave it like this square root though. So, okay, why don't you pause and try example 2, and I will show you what the answer is when you come back. Okay, so if we plugged in, remember we subtract first, add, we got the square root of 32, and then I did the factor tree thing to get my radical simplified, so it's 4 root 2. If we wanted to approximate that, we would get that this is approximately 5.66. But I like to leave it like the radical, so that's probably how you should do it too. Or not probably, that is how you should do it. Okay, so let's talk about the midpoint. Oops, trying to put things upside down. Okay, so remember midpoint is the middle, so it's the average between those 2 endpoints. Okay, so we add the x's together and divide by 2 and we'll get the middle. And then add the y's together, divide by 2, and we'll get the middle. And so it's still x1, y1, x2, y2. But remember, this time we're adding. So our x's, our midpoint is going to be x1 plus x2, so -3 plus 7 over 2. And this isn't a point, so we're going to make it write it like an ordered pair. And then our y's are -1 plus -5 over 2. So add first, you'll get 4 over 2, and then -6 over 2, and then divide. So the midpoint, the point between those 2 points is 2, -3. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video, try example 4, and we'll see what we got. Okay, so I get that our midpoint is 5, -5. So make sure you write down any questions you had on that example too. Okay, so that's it for our foldable. I did have two other examples that I want you to write down, so you can write them on the notebook paper that you're going to glue or tape this onto, or whatever, but they need to be in your notes. When I do your notebook check, I'm going to look. You really could, if you wanted to, write them on the back here, and then just tape it on one side so you can flip it and see them on the back. I don't care how you write them down. Okay, so go ahead and pause and write them down, and then we'll talk about how to figure this out. Okay, so for these problems, they're different than the ones that we did in the foldable because they tell us what the midpoint is, and they ask us to find the other endpoint. So we're kind of working backwards here. And we can do this using a formula. If you think about what the midpoint formula is telling you, it says add the x together, divide by 2, and that'll equal the midpoint of the x coordinate. So we can use that to help us figure it out, because we know that if we add those two x's together and divide by 2, we'll get the x coordinate of the midpoint. And then the same is true for y. So y plus y2 over 2 equals the y coordinate of your midpoint. So if we just make it equal to those midpoint numbers and solve for the one that we're missing, then we can find that missing point. Okay, so it says the midpoint of CD is this. So this is our midpoint with point C at negative 4, 5, and we want to find point D. So this would be XM, YM, and then we'll call this X1, Y1. If we plug those numbers into each of our formulas and work backwards, we could find X2 and Y2. So let's try that. So our X1 is negative 4 plus X2 over 2 equals our X midpoint coordinate, which is 3. So let's solve this one, and then we can write the Y1. So to get rid of the fraction, we times both sides by 2. So negative 4 plus X2 equals 6. If we add 4, we get that X2 is equal to 10. So setting up the same thing for Y, we would have negative 5 plus Y2 over 2 equals negative 6. Solving that, times by 2. Negative 5 plus Y2 is negative 12. And add 5. We get that Y2 equals negative 7. So that means that point D is at 10, negative 7. Okay, so if you didn't like using the formula to solve this, there is another way, and that's using a graph. Okay, so I made a graph of those points. So here's our point C at negative 4, negative 5. And our point M, our midpoint, is at 3, negative 6. So what we're looking for is our point D. So since we know that M is exactly in the middle, we can use the slope between those 2 points to find where point D is going to be. So we know that we go down 1, and then we go over 2, 4, 6, 7. So we went down 1 over 7. So to get to point D, we're going to have to do the same thing. We can go down 1 over 2, 4, 6, 7. So this is where point D would have to be, right here. And if we count that out, we'd be at 10, negative 7. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you'll probably like using the graph better than using the formula. So I don't care which way you do it, you just have to know how to do it. So let's go ahead and try the next example. So this one gives us the midpoint at 3, 4, and the first point is at negative 3, negative 2. Okay, so I know you might not have graph paper, so I'm just going to leave this here. So go ahead and try to count it out and see what you get. Okay, so if we count to get up to there, we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we went up 6, and then we go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So we go over 6. Okay, so we could really take our point, our midpoint, that's at 3, 4, And if we added 6 to both of them, because we went up 6 and then to the right 6, we would get our new point. So point B would be at 9, 10. Okay, but if you want to use the graph to count it, go up 6 to the right 6, and you'll be at point B. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is where point B would be. Up 6 and to the right 6. Okay, so if you like using the graph, if you like using the graph halfway, really we just need to figure out what the difference is between these. So 3 minus -3 is 6. 4 minus -2 is 6. So that's where we got those numbers from if we wanted to look at it with the points, which is really what we're doing when we use the formula as well. Okay, so make sure you ask any question you didn't understand tomorrow, or pick up some graph paper to put in your notes. Werner out.